everyone, I'm Christina with the Salty Pep DIY. Welcome to my channel and my very first video. Before we get into the project, I wanted to give a little bit of an intro about why I decided to start this channel. First and foremost, I love making things, I love creating things. I've dabbled in a lot of different creative mediums over the years, and there is something so fun and satisfying and budget friendly about doing a project yourself or totally transforming something you got at the thrift store. I've also been really inspired by different bloggers and DIY YouTubers over the years, and I thought it would be really cool if I can inspire other people to make some of my own projects. So if you do end up making any of my projects, make sure you leave a comment below or send me a message on Instagram and let me know how it turned out. And finally, I planned to make over my bedroom last winter, but life changed, and I thought maybe there are people out there who would find inspiration or value in seeing how I approached projects to redo my space when I had trouble sourcing DIY supplies and my budget had constricted significantly. So I plan to share videos of projects I did to make over my space, and some of them I'm still working on, as well as budget-friendly decor items and thrift flips because I love doing those too. So let's get into the project. This is a DIY Anthropologie-inspired nightstand or table. When I first began to make over my bedroom, I knew that I needed pretty narrow dimensions for my nightstand because of the particular layout of my bedroom, and where my bed has to be located doesn't give me a lot of space to work with. And because I was going with a bohemian decor and I wanted to utilize as many natural materials as possible, I absolutely fell in love with this table from Anthropologie. However, the price tag was way beyond my budget, so I sat down to figure out how I could invoke the vibe of this table without invoking its price tag. It ended up involving 4 buckets from the Dollar Tree and lots of hot glue and rope. I'm so happy with how this project turned out. I hope if you're inspired to make it yourself, I hope you love it just as much. And if you end up liking this video, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button. And if you want to know every time I post a video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it so that you'll get notified every time I post a new video. Let's get into the project. For this project, you're going to need 2 to 4 buckets or bins, depending on the size and the shape you want your table to be. The buckets I used, I found at the Dollar Tree. They were round plastic buckets that measured 12 inches across and only about 5 inches tall. So to get my table to be 21 or 22 inches tall when it was done, I used 4 buckets and I inverted every other one. So as you see in this picture, when you stack them and glue them, you're going to attach top to top and bottom to bottom. You can really customize the look of your table depending on which buckets you choose. For example, I had a hard time choosing between the ones I ultimately went with and these rounded bowls I found at the Dollar Tree because the configuration in this picture was so cool. I ultimately decided on a more geometric shape, but I still think this would be an awesome shape for a table, and if anyone decides to use these bowls and to make the table this way, I would love to hear about it. You're also going to need rope for this project. Now, this is another main way you can customize the look of your table. It's kind of like those old choose your own adventure books. There's a lot of paths to take to make the outcome just a bit different, depending on the thickness of the rope you choose and also the color. I went with a Sisal rope. It's lighter in color. I chose a 1/4 inch thick, and the packs came in 100 feet each, and I used 4 of them, about 1 pack per bucket, though I definitely used more than I needed because I did the first bucket off camera and I did the underside just to test the process, and that definitely wasn't necessary. The other rope options I considered were jute for more of a rustic look, cotton for more of a neutral look, and manila, which I love the coloring of, but it's more expensive than Sisal, and I had trouble finding it in stock at any of the stores I tried at the time I started this project. I also had trouble finding the Sisal rope. I did end up finding it at Walmart, which turned out to be the cheapest anyways. I'll link all of these rope options in the description below, and I'll include a link to Sisal rope on Amazon just in case you want to have it delivered. You're also going to need a top and a bottom for your table. For the bottom, you're going to need something that's the same size and shape as your bucket. I found a 12-inch MDF Circle at Hobby Lobby. Originally, I wanted to use a Dollar Tree pizza pan because they're also 12 inches, but they were out of stock. So that's another good budget option if you're using the same buckets as I did. I don't think whatever you're gluing to the bottom is really providing that much structural support. It's really more to give it a finished look, so you could probably get away with using something like thick cardboard. For the top, this is another one of those choose your own adventure table decisions because you could use the same thing as you used on the bottom for just a rope look on top, but if you want something different, you could use a wooden plate and stain it like I did, as you'll see later in the video, or you could thrift something that's more unique. It's whatever your preferences are. And finally, for this project, you're going to need a fair amount of glue. I used both E6000 and hot glue. I used the E6000 to attach the MDF Circle to the bottom and also to attach the buckets to themselves. I use the hot glue to attach the rope to the buckets, and as you can see, the majority of this project is winding the rope around and around the buckets and gluing as you go. I'm not sure exactly how much hot glue I used for this project because I tend to buy hot glue in really big packs, so it's harder to keep track, but it was a fair amount. My favorite combination to use is the Surebonder Mini Detail Hot Glue Gun and the Gorilla Mini Hot Glue Sticks because I like to control the rate of flow with the detail gun, and I think the Gorilla Hot Glue Sticks really provide the best hold. I'll link both of those below. I might have used less hot glue if I had found white or more neutral colored buckets because I didn't want to see even tiny slivers of the blue peeking through, so I glued each row of rope all the way around and pressed tightly instead of gluing just in a few spots on each row. And I didn't do anything special to fill in the handles, I just carefully glued the rope to the line of rope below it and made sure to keep the curvature in line with the rest of the bucket. You actually want to make sure you're gluing each line of rope to the line below it as well as to the bucket because it's going to give it a lot more structural support than if you're just gluing each line of rope to the bucket itself. When you get to the center of the bottom and your rope circles are getting tighter and tighter, I used hot glue to glue down the very end of the rope where I cut it, but I used my scissors to press down on that until it dried just in case any hot glue squeezed out. I didn't want it to burn my fingers. I also put a small circle of Eileen's tacky glue on the end of the cut rope just to prevent any fraying. It dries clear so you don't see it. When you go to wrap the buckets that you're gluing bottom to bottom, you don't have to put rope on the bottom because you won't see it, but as you can see in this shot, I did put a sparing amount of rope on the bottom of my buckets because unlike the top, the bottom of the buckets had a very thin lip that made it almost impossible to glue them together without putting something in between. So adding that small amount of rope just allowed the glue to have something to hold on to. If the buckets or bowls you're using have enough of a lip or enough of a flat surface to glue together, you may actually glue all of them together before you start wrapping any of them in rope, so this wouldn't be an issue for you. And also, keep in mind that if you add rope in between the buckets, that is going to add height to your table. While this project is very simple, it's definitely not the quickest project. I think it took me about an hour, maybe a little more per bucket to wrap in rope, but I think the results are well worth spending a few nights in a row wrapping and wrapping buckets. My best advice is to put some music on in the background or maybe one of your favorite TV shows and just get into the groove. Wow, that was a lot of wrapping, but it was so fun to see this project coming together as I finished more and more of it. When you get to the end of wrapping your buckets in rope, you're going to want to take some scissors and trim off any fibrous hanging bits. The Sisal rope was a bit hairy, so you're definitely going to want to trim it to give it a finished look. After I finished trimming, I used E6000 to glue the buckets together just to give it that secure hold, and I put a stack of books on top and let that sit for a day or two just to really make sure it dried tight. I also glued 2 strips of rope around the 2 narrow seams where the buckets were glued together just to match that middle seam that's wider and there was a bit of a lip. It just gives it more of a finished look. I decided to make a wooden plate topper as an option for my table, so I bought a wooden plate at Hobby Lobby. It's about 14 inches, and I stained it with Minwax Special Walnut Stain, which is one of my favorite stains to use. I'll link both of these in the description below. I gave the wooden plate a once-over with a fine grit sanding sponge before I started to stain, and then I just used a disposable cloth to wipe on the stain, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wipe off any excess. I let that dry completely and then I gave it a second coat of stain. You want to make sure you do this in a very well ventilated area or preferably outside because it's definitely pretty stinky. Once that cured, I brushed on Minwax polyacrylic according to the directions. I did 3 coats of this and let it dry completely between each coat. After the top coat dried, I knew that I didn't want to permanently attach the wooden plate to the top of the table because I wanted to keep that top bucket open for storage underneath, so I could put remotes or things like that inside of it. And I also wanted to keep my options open in the future in case I wanted to use a plain rope topper or any other type of top for the table. So to keep the wooden plate detachable but less movable than just resting it on top in case I ever bumped into it, I actually ended up adding 4 pieces of rope on the bottom side of the wooden plate just inside where they would rest on the bucket. I thought I had pressed record on my camera at this part of the process. Unfortunately, I didn't, so I don't have that exact video to show. But what I did was I took the top bucket and flipped it upside down, or if you've already glued the whole table together, just flip that upside down on top of the wooden plate. And you want to trace around the bucket when it's centered with a pencil. It's fine, you won't really see it if you've stained it, especially a darker color like the special walnut. And then you want to measure the width of the wall of the bucket and the rope you attach to it, and use your pencil to mark that width inside of the circle you trace. That line is where you're going to glue the outside of those 4 pieces of rope. The goal is for you to get those 4 pieces of rope to sit flush against the inside of the bucket when you set the plate on top. Once I did this, the plate lifts off easily, but it also doesn't move much when it's set on top. If you've decided to go with a plain rope top and you don't need to access the top bucket for storage, then you can just glue the top to the table before you wrap it in rope and do it just like you did the bottom. But if you do want the plain rope top to be removable, then my best suggestion is to start wrapping the rope on the outside of the MDF circle or the pizza pan or whatever you choose to use as the topper, and work towards the center. That way you don't have to worry about it maybe being off center if you started in the center with the rope. I'll show you both tabletop options I did, the wooden plate and the plain rope. I honestly love them both, so leave a comment below if you have a preference either way, because I'm still deciding which looks best in my bedroom, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe I switch them out every so often in the future. And that's it. We've gotten to the end of the table adventure. If you followed along and made your own Anthropologie inspired nightstand or side table, I hope you've fallen in love with the results as much as I did with mine. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found some inspiration and enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button and let me know in the comments if you tried the project. I'd love to hear how it turned out. If you want to get notified every time I post a new video, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the little bell next to it. Until next time, bye everyone!